Good morning, Mississippi State University Pre-Law Society of America. My name is Dave. I work with Velocity Test Prep. I'm here to answer some of your questions today, and that was sort of the point of why we started Velocity, because we would be able to do things like this. I think that the more information we can get out into the world, the better it is for you and the better it is for us, and in that way it's sort of better for everybody. So I've got a list of a few questions you've sent in. I'm going to take a stab at them. If after this you still have other questions about the LSAT, about law school admissions, about the price of tea in China, about why hagfish rock so hard, about the best way to skin a cat, that's gross, anything, you can reach me at dave@velocitylsat.com. Alright, let's take a look at your questions. Number one, what section of the LSAT usually is the most difficult for most students to improve on? That's kind of like asking which one of the U.S. House of Representatives is the worst. I mean, is there just an all of the above? They suck. But actually, for most students, while the game section of the test seems the most scary at first, it turns out to be the reading comprehension that actually requires the most work. And it's not just that it's more work, it's that while the game section is new and different and crazy and scary, you start to get into it and most people start to think it's kind of fun. Nobody has ever taken the reading comprehension section and thought, ooh, that was fun. Number two, how long do you think I should set aside to prepare for the LSAT? Your mileage may vary here, but for most people, about 3 months is the right amount of time to study. I've just found that much less than that, and you may not have enough time to maximize your potential. Too much more than that, and you may begin to feel burned out. And you'll know that happened when you sit down to do a study section and you realize you just don't care what the answers to any of these questions are. And if that's happening to you, you've probably done enough studying for today. Set it aside for a while. Number three, what methods did you use to make yourself quicker to complete each section of the LSAT? Most common question I'm ever asked. And it's funny because this is the one that we all already know the answer to. How do you get faster at the LSAT? The same way that you get faster at anything else in the world you want to do. You get better at it. You practice it. I mean, think about it. Literally any activity that you wanted to get faster at. Let's say that you spend a lot of time with your grandma because she's just such a lovely woman and she likes to knit. And you watch her knit, and it's just these knitting needles, and there's sparks coming off them as they move at the speed of light. And before you've even begun to thread your needle, if that's what you do to a knitting needle, I don't know anything about knitting. You look over, and she's already completed an entire scarf and sweater. Grandma, how did you get so fast? And she's been knitting for the last 60 years, right? If you really wanted to do that, you would learn how to knit, and then you would just knit and knit and knit and knit and knit. That, of course, is just really begging us to then answer the next question. How do you become more familiar with the LSAT? And that, I think, is the heart of the question, how do you get faster? And the way you get more familiar with it, the way you get better at it, which is the way you get faster at it, pattern recognition. This test is a standardized test. As such, it is the same. Every time they ask the same questions, and every time those questions are susceptible to the same strong-arm techniques of answering and attacking them. What I'm going to teach you in class is the same thing that you could do if you just got a whole stack of every LSAT that had been previously administered and went through them looking for patterns. I mean, pretty soon your study area would start to look like Carrie's bedroom from Homeland. But that's what we're after, and that's what I've done. I've spent the last 10 years looking at these tests and seeing how these questions are like other questions. So when I say being good at LSAT, well, let me back up. When I say being fast at LSAT means being good, I think that's true for anything else in the universe. When I say being good at LSAT, what I really mean is understanding what the questions really want you to do. Because once you can do that, And once you see them as part of a larger whole, you'll find pretty quickly that your major problem isn't really time. Your problem is time only because you are not yet familiar enough with what the test wants from you and how to answer. When you don't have that down, then you can struggle endlessly to answer these questions. But once you do have that down, most of the test goes pretty fast. That's not to say there isn't still some hard material that will give you some headaches and make you hate the test and the test writers and your own life, but most of it you'll be able to dispense with pretty quickly, and you will find that time is not really your enemy. Okay, number 4. What's the best way to start studying for the LSAT? Is there a particular section you should start on? Yeah, I would start with the logical reasoning, but that's only because it's half the test, so a little bit of work there really maximizes the reward. I would also make sure that you start with conditional symbolization. You may have heard something about that. It is a symbolic language, kind of like math is a symbolic language. But you only have to learn a very small bit of this symbology in order to have great utility on the test. I would say that roughly 20% of the logical reasoning section and anywhere from 0 all the way up to 75% of the game section will depend on your ability to do conditional symbolization. And it's not that difficult, it really isn't, but it is new. And so if you start with it, that'll give you the most time to become familiar with it, and as we've already discussed in excruciating detail, familiarity equals speed. Then, once you get into it, what the best way to start studying, I think, is to approach it with this mindset. That no matter what else you do, your job is not to get these questions right. It doesn't matter. Getting these questions right doesn't help you get into law school. Getting these questions right doesn't make you smarter, doesn't do anything for you. It certainly doesn't make you any more likely to find a mate. It's not about getting these questions right. What it is about is understanding the LSAT. So every study session that you enter into, go into it with the goal that you are going to understand a little bit more how the test works. Finally, I think you should get a coach. I think it should be me. But whether or not it's me, everything else in the world that you want to get good at would be easier if you had somebody who already knew how to do it and who could show you how. So no matter who it is you decide to hire as your coach, obviously, make sure it's somebody who knows how to do the test. And the point of that is all that pattern recognition I was talking about earlier. A really good coach can do that for you. And then instead of starting at 0, you already start at sort of 50 out of 100, Okay, question 5. What are some big improvements that you've witnessed on the LSAT as far as starting from a low point and getting a really high score? Well, pretty much every term I'll have a couple of students who improve their scores by more than 20 points. Some recent stories include a kid who emailed me last week saying that he had gotten his February LSAT score back, and he was in the online course, so he didn't specify what his starting score was, but he had gotten a 164, and he said that was more than 20 points higher than where he had started. Probably the highest number I can ever remember seeing was 31 points, and this was from a girl who started with a 134, and her name is Sarah, and she, on the real test, she got a 165. And with Sarah, it was just, she began her odyssey totally not knowing what the LSAT was about, and a little bit of instruction went a long way, and then, she turned on the burners, right? And maybe one of the best was Sam, and he started with a 153, and then on the real test, he got a 177, and that's 24 points for those of you keeping score at home. And that's pretty awesome. So those are some of the bigger improvements, but I think maybe what's even more important are some of those more common improvements. And the most common improvement among my students is about 12 points. To put that into context, the national average, or I should say the median score on the LSAT nationally is about a 152. Well, you add 12 points to a 152 and you end up with a 164, which is the 90th percentile. So the typical student, the most typical student we can imagine, taking my course starts out as typical and ends up in the top 10%. That's bitchin'. Finally, one last question from your president. I've heard the Velocity's Logic Games course is unique in that it stresses hypotheticals. No. We'll come back to that. Rather than upfront work, also known as framing different worlds or template making, could you talk a little bit how your Logic Games course is unique and how this hypothetical heavy approach serves students well? I ask because I've heard tremendous things from many 170 plus scores about your Logic Games course, but it seems that doing a fair amount of upfront work, deductions, template making, etc. is necessary, especially for really open-ended games. We'll start here. The whole deal about the whole thing is that you've got to be more efficient, not less so. I just can't imagine why anybody would ever do hypothetical situations for the LSAT games. I mean, there's quite enough real actual work that you need to do to keep you well occupied for 35 minutes in a section without doing hypothetical possibilities. So I don't do that. I don't endorse it. I don't approve of it. I don't think you should do it. What I do is a big, burly, brawny, bare-knuckled, muscular approach to the games. It's not maybe the most elegant, but what it is a means of operating that anybody can do and that will always yield results. I'll talk about it a little bit, but by far the most effective way to learn it is just to see it in action. We'll start here. About 10 years ago, when I started training to teach the LSAT, I got the logical reasoning. I got the reading comp. I mean, I have a degree in philosophy. I had some background in it. It made sense to me. I've spent a lifetime reading loads of varied materials. It wasn't strange. I wasn't perfect at it. That took some work. But it also fit. The games, on the other hand, no fitty, no sir. It was awful. I was terrified of them. I didn't think that I was going to be able to do them, much less ever to teach them to anyone. And my trainer, I think, was from accounts from many of my students who have been in other courses, sounded very much like other LSAT instructors out there in the world. And what she did was this approach that was this ad hoc, backward-looking, case-specific minstrel magic show where she would say, okay guys, you try this, and we try something, and trying our best to mimic what we'd seen her do before, and then she'd say, oh, okay, well, look how easy it is when you do this. And I was like, fuck you! How am I supposed to know to do this? And there were all these deductions, right? Deductions that you could make, that if you made them, made the game go. And then sometimes we'd get to a game and we'd be like, well, where are the deductions? And say, well, this game doesn't really have very many. And be like, well, but what happened to this? And she's, well, I mean, some games have more deductions than others. And it was the most frustrating experience of my life. Like, how could you know when to do this and when there wasn't so much of this and what the difference was? And nobody had a satisfactory answer to that. And then she turned us loose on this game, and this is 10 years ago, and it changed honestly, it changed my life. Because I probably wouldn't have started Velocity if it hadn't been for this idea. She turned us loose on a game. Everybody else was trying to do the things that they had seen her do. And I started that for about 30 seconds and realized I just couldn't. Like, I didn't even know where to start doing what she would have tried to do. And so instead I just did something. And the thing that I did was just to graphically, with my pencil, follow the directions that were given in the rules. So for every question, every time, everything I did was to simply put those directions into practice. And I didn't try to think about what hypothetically might be happening, and I didn't try to think about what I might be under the surface that I could deduce or infer. Instead, I just took it at face value, followed the directions, and at the end of that game, I was the only one who finished the game out of the whole class. And it turned on a light bulb. And that light bulb led to the entirety of the Velocities game course. And in it, we depend upon the fact that every game on the test, every single one, really, truly, at its heart, demands one thing from you. You have to be able to follow directions. Yeah, the directions are given to you in the abstract. Yes, they're not clear. But if you can take those directions, render them in a visually organized form so that you can make use of them, then that's the whole game solved. What I really have done that I think has made the most impact is to realize that basically every game that the test writers, not basically, full stop, every game that the test writers have made available for the last 10 years has been susceptible to one of 5 beginning templates. So there's an organizational scheme that I've used in 5 different ways, and that has accounted for every single one of the last 10 years worth of games. Now, you can go back farther than that. The test is now, 23, 24 years old? You know, the first few years of the test, it started in 91. The first few years of the test, there were games that were all over the map. But it's been more than 10 years since we've seen any of those games. And we can go back 15 years and only find 2 examples. Back in 2003 is the most recent. Before that, you go back another 3 or 4 years and you still see none. The thing is, my approach is based on the test as it is today. And it involves you becoming faster at implementing the visual organizational system I talk about so that you can just follow directions and not worry about anything else. Now, it doesn't preclude you from making deductions and making inferences. If you want to do that, Godspeed to you, sir or madam. You can do that while at the same time operationally depending on my system. But if you can't do that, if you're just not good at it, you don't have to. You don't have to worry about it anymore. I can take that weight off of your shoulders. All you really have to do is adopt this system and put it into practice over and over and over again. And like I said, it'll be a lot easier for me to show you that than to tell you about that. And to that end, you can find full explanations for every question in each game section from the 2007 June test and from the 2013 June test for free at the website. If you have problems finding it, dave@velocitylsat.com and I'll point you in the right direction. But there's a tab that says free LSAT prep. And that way you get to see me doing it instead of hear me talking about it. And I think that'll go a long way towards explaining exactly how it is that I handle the games materials. Alright, I hope that you found this informative and at least not totally boring. If you have other questions, like I said, dave@velocitylsat. And thanks for inviting me, and I do hope this helps. Bye.